Hi, my name is Imogen, and I'm going to do a breakdown of That Evening Sun by William Faulkner. This short story was published in the March 1931 issue of American Mercury. The setting of this story is of note as it is in what Faulkner refers to as his apocryphal county, meaning it is fictitious, he made it up. It is based on Lafayette, Mississippi, and it is called... what now? But the town specifically that this is set in is actually called Jefferson. It's a small, quaint town, and the time period is in the late 19th century, right after the Plessy versus Ferguson trial, which basically the US was saying separate but equal. Not a fun time. Critics praise Faulkner for his use of narration in the story, as it was revolutionary for its time. Our narrator is a 24-year-old man named Quentin Compton. And basically, he is thinking about how it's wash day, it's a Monday, everyone's getting their laundry done, and this triggers a series of flashbacks, going all the way back to when he was 9 years old. And what's great about the narration is that the sentence structure changes as he gets lost in his memories, and it's almost like he becomes a 9-year-old boy with shorter sentence structure. His story is about a woman named Nancy. She's an African-American washwoman. And he starts off by recalling how she was kicked in the face and her teeth were knocked out on the street by a white man, but yet she was the one imprisoned. She was pregnant and she tried to hang herself while in prison. Her suicide was unsuccessful. Her husband's name is Jesus, and after he finds out that she's pregnant with a white man's child, he threatens to kill her. So Nancy seeks asylum in Quentin's family's house, but even though she's terrified and scared for her life, she realizes that there's no way that she can stay there forever, and the family is basically telling her to go home. But she knows that if she goes home, she will get murdered. So instead of going home alone, she convinces Quentin, who's 9 years old, and his 2 younger siblings to go with her. While they're all there, you can see she's starting to get manic. She is starting a fire, even though it's not cold out, and she's also touching hot things and not realizing that it's burning her hand. The kids want to go home, and their father does come and pick them up. But as they're leaving, they realize that Nancy is going to be alone, and the characters do assume that she's going to get murdered. This assumption can be seen in the question that Quentin asks his father. He says, "Who will do our washing now, father?" And that's where the story comes full circle. It goes all the way back to washing day, and Quentin is kind of snapped back into his adult self. His sentence structures start getting longer again, and he realizes that he only thought about her as a washwoman and not as a person. Throughout the story, Nancy's objectified, either as a washwoman or as someone to have sex with by these white men, and she's blamed for everything, and no one really cares. There are a lot of really interesting points in this story that I want to highlight really quick. First and foremost is irony. There's a ton of irony in this story, and I'm going to talk about 3 points. The first one is that the children's conversations parallel Nancy's plight. Even though they don't understand what she's going through and they really aren't empathetic towards her, they are constantly discussing among themselves, who's a scaredy cat, and they're accusing each other. Meanwhile, Nancy's literally in front of them and afraid for her life. The second one is that her husband's name is Jesus. Jesus is typically, a name that's viewed as a savior, but this Jesus is coming to kill her. And we get some really great lines with that, like, "Jesus is gone," is the line that Quentin says. And it just is so powerful, but he's talking about her husband. The third point that I think is ironic and also interesting is that the title of the story is actually based on a song called St. Louis Blues by W.C. Handy. And it's a song that's, ironically, about a woman who hates the night because she wants to be with her lover, whereas Nancy hates the night because she's afraid her ex-lover is going to come and kill her. The editor of this collection of short stories in front of me is a woman named Joyce Carol Oates, and she views this short story as a masterpiece. She said, and I'll read it directly, "It is something of an experiment in dramatic form, rare in his work." The last point that I want to discuss is how separate but equal is not equal at all, which is a huge part of this short story. We can see that in the dynamic between Nancy and all of the white characters, and we can see that in how Jesus feels when white men enter his home to sleep with his wife. He feels like he doesn't even have a home. And I think Faulkner's analysis of his hugely unjust society through this fictitious world that he created is absolutely remarkable, and I hope you have the opportunity to read this story.